Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
Welcome to the Speaking of Wealth Show. This is your host, Jason Hartman, where we discuss profit strategies for speakers, publishers, authors, consultants, coaches, info marketers, and just go over a whole bunch of exciting things that you can use to increase your business, to make your business more successful and more passive and more automated and more scalable. So we will be back with a great interview. Be sure to visit us at speakingofwealth.com. You can take advantage of our blog, subscribe to the RSS feed, and many other resources for free at speakingofwealth.com. And we will be back with a great interview for you in less than 60 seconds. It's my pleasure to welcome Edward Meyer to the show. He's coming to us today from Orlando, Florida, and it happens to be Halloween as we're recording this. So I thought it fitting to interview a company that has built a publishing empire, and that is the Ripley's Publishing Empire. And it's just fantastic to have him here. Edward has been with the company for more than 35 years. He's the VP of Exhibits and Archives at Ripley Publishing, and it's great to have him join us today. Edward, how are you?
I'm great, and thank you for having Ripley's on the show this afternoon.
Well, the pleasure is ours. The pleasure is ours.
And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you, too. So you're out with a new book, I guess, right? And this book has an interesting iPhone application attached to it, right?
Well, we have been in the book publishing business since 1929. The first couple books were written by Robert Ripley himself, great newspaper cartoonist, founder of our company. But for the last 10 years, we have come out with what we call the Ripley Annual. We still do other books as well, but one big premier annual book every September that, is basically aimed for the gift market. But it's the very best of what we could find in the calendar year 2012, 2013 in this case. The book is called Dare to Look. And as you mentioned, what makes it different than the previous 9, because they're all the same number of pages, 256, so oversized format, approximately 2,500 stories, 500 photographs. But what makes this one different is we've got a brand new technology, a telephone app that is free at your app store called Ripley OddScan. And 18 different pages within the book. You'll see a bright red and green logo, and anytime you see that page, once you've downloaded the app, you can scan that page and find hidden content. For the most part, it's video. So, when you're looking at the book, you might see a really cool picture of a dog with a long tongue, and, it's kind of a fun picture by itself, but if you scan the OddScan on that page, you actually see the dog licking an ice cream cone with his long tongue on video, as well as drinking from the bottom of a long cup. So it just is an extra added attraction to give you some fun, and of course to make it even more real, because everything in Ripley's, believe it or not, no matter how unbelievable it may seem, is in fact real, and it's just another way of verifying the truth here.
Yeah. So that now is that app available for iPhone and Android phones?
Yes, it is. I personally am not an Android customer, and I have to confess we've had a little bit of problems apparently, but it should be up and running fine and available wherever you buy your phone apps.
Well, Edward, what has made Ripley's such a sustainable, enduring, engaging, and entertaining brand for so many years? I mean, what a great story. I don't people in the business think of Ripley as a a great publisher and a great brand like that. It's something that we sort of see on, in touristy places and things like that. But there's really quite a lot behind it, isn't there?
Well, the short, easy answer is human curiosity. But as you've suggested, we're a multifaceted company. Robert Ripley was born in Santa Rosa, California in 1890. Most of his life he lived in New York City, dies in New York in 1949. So that's a long time ago. Yet we have sustained his founding business for another 60-plus years. We're in our 95th year since the very first, believe it or not, cartoon. The first book was 1929, and the first museum, which we call auditorium, spelled O-D-D, that's the Ripley buzzword, was in 1933. So even that is 80 years ago exactly this year that we've been in that business. Ripley himself had a long-standing radio show. At the end of his career, he got into television. Since his death, we have had 5 different television shows, the most famous probably being in the early 80s, hosted by Jack Palance. But, we are a multimedia company based on the foundation is truly a newspaper cartoon, black and white pen and ink sketches that Ripley drew himself every day and for over 30 years. And it's been continued with 6 other artists for another 60 years after him. So I'd like to think that, when people think of the odd and the unusual, we are the people that they think of first. But people want their 15 minutes of fame, and if, the two-headed cow is born on your farm, chances are you're going to call Ripley's and see if Ripley's is, A, interested enough to put it in their book, B, interested enough to maybe buy the cow and put it in one of our museums.
Well, so in terms of the book, is this the first time that you've tied an app in with a book, with this latest version?
Well, this year is. We've actually done 3 different books this year with this technology, but it's brand new for us this year. And as I said, this is our premier product. So the other 2 books have got a couple. This one's got 18. And some of the video on page 172, 173, there's a gentleman who puts 161 clothes pegs on his face. We actually brought him to our offices in Orlando, Florida, and created the video ourselves. So we could verify how many pegs it is. We could learn how he does it, what the whole raison d'etre, behind why he does it is. And so it wasn't just buying a piece of video that was out there. We've created, an exhibit basically that, that is a standalone attraction within the book. In our museums, again, we just did this year, 2013. We've actually, the same technology. We've got little poster boards throughout our museums, and if you see that poster, you can click on it, and it'll give you information on the exhibit that you're looking at. So it works exactly the same. The book is kind of cool because it really is take-home value that you can instantly email or Facebook your friends with.
So yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, if you were also utilizing the same idea with the exhibits, and it sounds like you are. How many exhibits, or do you call them museums?
Well, the public calls them museums. We try very hard to use the word auditoriums. That's our copyrighted, patented word. But a museum with a difference, I guess, is the best way to define it. Currently, we have 32 in 10 countries. The very first one, that is still existing, the first permanent one opened in St. Augustine, Florida in 1950. So that particular one is 63 years old, and it is still one of our best.
Fantastic. And take us back to the founding of Ripley, and it was with this cartoon. Tell us a little bit more about the evolution of the company.
Ripley was born in Santa Rosa, California, tiny little town, still a pretty sleepy little place, but in 1890 there was literally nothing there. He got his first job in San Francisco drawing sports cartoons. He's a high school dropout, did not graduate, but from a very early age, self-taught flair for art. And a visitor to his little town, his family in Santa Rosa, was connected with the San Francisco Chronicle and said, this guy's got some talent. Let me show his work, and maybe we can get him a job in San Francisco as a sports illustrator. We're talking about a time where, the camera's been invented, but it really isn't being utilized for daily newspapers. It's too expensive. That all papers would have staff artists that would draw the stories of the day. And Ripley's, specialty was sports. He himself was interested in baseball. Later in his life, he gets interested in boxing and handball, and plays a bit of tennis and golf as well. So a natural affiliation to sports. Well, from 3 years working in San Francisco, he goes to New York City to try out for the New York Giants. Up to then, sports was still more important to him than his artwork, but he was making a living by combining the both. So he goes to New York specifically to play baseball, gets injured seriously in spring training, and never really plays baseball again, and is now, in a foreign place, doesn't know anybody. He's got no family. The only other skill he has is his art, and so he starts to take it a little more serious, and, it becomes a full-time job for him. 1918, he's already been in New York for 5 years, but 1918 he creates the first cartoon that he captions with the words "Believe It or Not," and it really is just a bunch of sports guys that did some amazing things. Well, it catches on pretty quick that the editors decide that this should be a regular feature. So he starts doing it, once a week, then twice a week, and it grows until it really becomes more important than his other work as such. 1922, end of 22, he takes a round-the-world trip, and it really changes his life. He sees foreign places, foreign cultures, and writes a journal-type report with his drawings and has them published as a daily diary sort of thing. And it just takes the publishing world by storm, that here's this little guy with basically no education reporting on the world, very much in a Mark Twain sort of way, but with the addition that it's got some artwork beside it. And it is from that trip in the early 20s that he really changes his career and starts doing nothing but Believe It or Not. 7 years later, 1929, he does his first book, and it's really a collection of the best of things that he's been doing in the newspaper for the last 7 years. The book is still, to my mind, the best book we've ever done, and we've got about 300 at this point. But the book is loved by William Randolph Hearst, who is the billionaire newspaper tycoon. And he says, hire Ripley. So Ripley goes from being a freelance artist to a highly paid artist with King Features Syndicate out of New York. And from that day in 1929, he's got the financial backing of one of the richest men in the world. And Hearst basically says, go travel, go find more stories like you did in that diary thing. And so Ripley becomes nicknamed the modern Marco Polo. He travels in his lifetime to 201 countries out of about 230 at the time, and he's the most traveled man of his time. Everywhere he goes, he's doing his drawings, and he starts collecting items to prove those drawings. If somebody says, I don't really believe there's shrunken heads made by the Jivaro Indians of Ecuador, South America, Ripley now brings back a shrunken head with him to prove what he drew. And pretty soon he's got enough stuff to fill a house, and third parties are telling him, you should build some museums and display your collection. And so the collecting really came out of just literally trying to prove what he was drawing. Today, the collection has roughly 40,000 objects from almost every country in the world. During Ripley's time in the 30s, he had temporary museums, which he called auditoriums, that typically were associated with World's Fairs. Chicago in 1933, San Diego in 1935, San Francisco in 1939, New York City 1940. And at some point, there's more money in the museum business than there is in the cartoon business, so he really takes it pretty serious. Sort of a spin-off, again, this guy is just, if you could compare him seriously to the Kardashians or any big name star today, Miley Cyrus, but not the naked Miley Cyrus. He is involved in all medias. He is one of the most recognized people in the world. 1936, he's actually voted the most popular man in America. So he's involved in everything, and he wasn't a natural public speaker, but his radio show would run weekly for 16 consecutive years, and typically was only second to Jack Benny. So there's hundreds, millions of people glued to the radio every Friday night to hear this guy. At the end of his career, he changes from radio to television. 1949, television really started late in 48, and all the classic shows that we think about early television, Milton Berle, Lucy, all actually came a little bit after Ripley. He was one of the very first people on television even. So when he dies in 1949, there is one permanent Ripley Museum in New York on Broadway, and all of his collection is sold at public auction. And a Broadway entrepreneurial type guy, impresario named John Arthur, goes to the public auction and buys up as much of the collection as he possibly can, and then teams with a gentleman named Doug Storr, who had been Ripley's right-hand man since 1930, and they decide to continue the company, but neither of them draws, so they have to hire an artist, but they really get into book publishing in a serious way. In Ripley's time, he only did 3 books, and in the 50s and 60s, we're doing 2 or 3 a year. And in Ripley's time, there was only one museum, and John Arthur, by the end of his career, he's built 4 or 5, and then the next guy, who was a Canadian named Alec Rigby, took the company from New York City and moved it to Toronto, Canada, and that's where I come in. And over the years, we've never stopped the cartoon. It is continuously done 365 days of the year. It is the longest running cartoon in newspaper history. We've continued publishing, and we've not only continued the auditoriums, but we've got into other attractions. Today, we have 32 Ripley's Believe It or Not museums, but we have 60 other attractions ranging from miniature golfs to haunted houses, perfect for Halloween, to 3 world-class aquariums, including one we just opened in Toronto about 3 weeks ago now.
Now, are the aquariums, are they weird fish, or I mean, what?
No, that's a fair question, and we do get asked that a little bit, and there may be 1 or 2 things you might not see at another aquarium, but they are a basic educational aquarium created by a fun company that we do things a little bit different, that the learning experience is a little more immersive and hopefully more fun is what we try to put into our aquariums. But it's still basically sharks, but you get to walk through a shark tunnel as if you're surrounded by the sharks. You get to touch the horseshoe crabs. You get to play with wave machines. So it's not weird fish, but they're presented differently is what makes our aquariums different than somebody else's. So
when you look at the company's revenue today, I mean, how does it kind of divide up? Where's the money coming from mostly? Is it like even between auditoriums and book publishing, or what's the big thing now?
Well, I'm not going to give you exact numbers.
I didn't expect exact numbers.
Prior to the opening of the Toronto Aquarium, our aquarium business and our attraction business were roughly the same, with publishing being the leftovers. But with this third aquarium, we will be making more money from our 3 aquariums than we do from all our other business.
Very interesting. Yeah, fantastic. So what's the weirdest thing in the history of Ripley? Can you pick one thing that was just the craziest, believe it or not?
Well, if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably tell you a different answer than I do today. But I have hundreds of favorites. But typically, I think the absolute strangest thing I've ever acquired is a full-sized taxidermied African elephant head, roughly 10 foot by 10 foot, weighing several thousand pounds, that has two trunks. Two fully sized working trunks, one over top of the other. Ripley's has a long relationship with animal oddities, but usually they're domestic animals, cows, pigs, chickens. So very rare to have a wild animal, and then, of course, to have the biggest animal on the face of the earth. This is a full-grown, huge animal. This head is as big as a car, and the trunks are roughly 5.5 feet tall and about 35 inches around. So, they're as big as a person. Truly a one-of-a-kind piece. We're never going to see another one.
Yeah, to top that, you'll have to find one with 3 trunks.
There you go. I have long said, and I'm only half joking, that I will retire when I find something with 3 heads, because we've got 2-headed cows, we've got 2-headed chickens, we've got 2-headed rabbits. In total, we probably have over 100 2-headed animals in our collection. But I've never seen or heard of one having 3 heads other than in Greek mythology. So that's Edward's holy grail.
Yeah. And every auditorium is different, obviously, right?
We have wax figures that are common to several museums, but actual hard artifacts, everything is real, everything is authentic, everything is one of a kind. So 32 museums, each with roughly 500 exhibits. There are 500 different exhibits. No 2 museums have very much in common.
Have any of the more mainstream museums tried to get a hold of your stuff or buy it from you? I mean,
well, we're buyers, not sellers. So we don't get too many people trying to buy our collection. But we are the envy of many mainstream museums. I've sat beside the people at auction houses and outbid them. As a privately owned company, our budget tends to be a little bigger than other people's, and we're not, dependent on fundraising, etc. A good example, we have a very, very impressive collection of Russian cosmonaut space material. And, one of our people we were bidding against was the Smithsonian. And for the most part, we got what we wanted and they didn't, because, they couldn't afford the prices that a public auction sometimes hits. And, we do get the occasional people asking us if we'll sell. Shrunken heads is probably the best example, because they're a very rare item and people know we have more than enough. But they're hard to find anywhere else, so it doesn't hurt anybody to say, hey, would you sell me one? But they got to offer us a lot more than it's actually worth before we'll part with it. It's valuable to us as an intrinsic piece as well as, the material value.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Well, what's next for Ripley's?
What's next for Ripley's? Well, this year, back in May, we published a biography of Robert Ripley. Not literally the first, it's the second, but the first one back in 1960 only told part of the story, so it's really the first full-length biography. And it has generated some interest to do a PBS documentary on Robert Ripley, so I'd say that's the next best thing. Probably be still a year before it actually gets on the air, but we're working very hard on a PBS television show.
Good. Well, yeah, that's fascinating. Well, good stuff. Well, Edward, any tips for publishers, for book authors that want to get noticed and don't have a taxidermied elephant with 2, I mean, just any tips you can share? I mean, you've done such a great job.
Well, I was going to say one thing that isn't always easy, because, everything costs, but, our new book that we've been talking about, Dare to Look, is one in a series of 10 that all have lenticular photography on the front, and the word lenticular is just a fancy word for layered, but it looks like the eyeball is looking through some window blinds. And that has become one of our iconic features, to have lenticular photography on the cover that literally, in this case, it looks like the eyeball follows you when you open the book. And that's the single thing I think makes the difference in any kind of, any product is marketing. And, books is a very competitive field, and it's a dying field, to be honest. So your book has to stand out on the shelf. I can't stress enough how valuable and how much money you should spend as a percentage on the cover, because, if the cover doesn't make you pick it up, it isn't going to sell.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that photography is really amazing. So spend some extra money on the cover. If your book has photography inside as well, that would be another good place to do it.
Yeah, we're a very visual society, and I don't know anybody personally that reads more than I do, but today's audience doesn't read much, and they like pictures. So if there's an ability to add some visuals to your book, that's going to help, I think. And I almost hate to say it because I am a big reader, but keep it short and sweet. People today don't read. Get to the core of the story and drop a few adjectives.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We live in this soundbite society, but
yeah, and that's exactly that. That's the best term for it. If people want the information in a minute or less.
Yeah. So keep it short, keep it snappy, and remember the old saying: "A picture says 1,000 words." Edward Meyer, thank you so much for joining us today. The website, of course, is Ripley's.com. Are there any other websites you want to give out?
Yeah, we've got RipleyPublishing.com, and each one of our museums has its own. So if you're traveling in Tennessee and you want to know about the Ripley's Museum in Gatlinburg, you can look at Ripley'sGatlinburg.com.
Well, Edward Meyer, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having us on. The book is Dare to Look and makes a great Christmas gift.
What's great about the shows you'll find on jasonhartman.com is that if you want to learn more about investing in real estate in different markets, there's a show for that. If you want to learn 17 ways rich people think and act differently, there's a show for that. If you want to know how to get paid to borrow, there's a show for that. And if you'd like to know why Amsterdam doesn't take dollars or why pools are for fools, there are even shows for that. Yep, there's a show for just about anything. Only from jasonhartman.com, or type in Jason Hartman in the iTunes store.
This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company, all rights reserved. For distribution or publication rights and media interviews, please visit www.hartmanmedia.com or email media@hartmanmedia.com. Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and the host is acting on behalf of Platinum Properties Investor Network, Inc. exclusively.